Hey Fox, in one of the episodes in the operating system playlist, we had a look at the installation of the Solaris 11 operating system by using the live media. And in that episode, we did mention about the three different types of ISO images that are available from Oracle for Solaris 11 operating system. One, of course, was the live media, which was basically a wizard-based installation that we looked at. And then there is on the other side an automated install that's used for hands-free installation of the Solaris 11, which we will take a look at a later episode in this playlist. What we will do today is to perform the installation of the Solaris 11 using a text-based installer. And for this purpose, we would make use of a virtual machine in a VirtualBox environment, just like we did when we performed the installation using the live media. Without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and pull up the VirtualBox environment on my host machine, which runs Ubuntu. The live media Solaris 11, which we created earlier, is there already as a virtual machine but is in powered off state. We do not need this for the environment for this current episode, so we won't touch it. Let's create a new one, which again is of type Solaris operating system, and the version number is 11. Let's call it as MyS11, but this time around it's a text server and not a UI based machine. We go to next. It might be worthwhile to specify 4 GB of RAM for this machine, because we might be using this machine for demonstrating various other facilities of Solaris 11. So let's keep it as 4 GB of RAM. We want a virtual hard drive to be created for this virtual machine, which is where the operating system would be installed. And we are okay with the default format of the hard disk, which in this case is VirtualBox disk image. Let that be dynamically allocated. Since we have plans around this virtual machine, maybe at a later stage we might be using this virtual machine to set up a package repository, we would probably need more space than 16 GB. To be on the safe side, let's assign it 60 GB of space so that we could use it for installing the package repository image. Let's create the virtual machine. Like before, what we have got is a empty virtual machine instance. I already have the Solaris 11 image downloaded and kept in my hard disk. So when I start this virtual image for the first time, when I start the virtual machine for the first time, it's obviously going to ask me for that ISO image from where it can boot from. But of course I forgot something. Let's cancel this and we'll take a look at the settings there. In the system settings, okay, now we need to shut this down for that setting to we need to power it off for that settings to be enabled. So we have the system settings where there is a boot order from what is the device from which the OS image is going to be used. So we don't have a floppy, we can safely remove that. We do have a DVD drive from which we wish to boot the OS, but we will put hard disk on top of all of this. Again, we explained about this in our previous episode. It'll try to look for the OS image in the hard disk, and if it doesn't find, obviously it will fall to the next boot device in the list, which in this case is a DVD drive. So that part is okay. When it comes to networking, we had a look at network address translation last time, where the IP address was assigned automatically to the virtual machine once the installation was through. But this time around we will choose an internal network, because we're going to assign an IP address manually to this virtual machine, and in the subsequent episodes we would see interactions between two virtual machines that exist inside the VirtualBox. So let's make use of the internal network here. We also spoke about shared folders, which is the directories from the host machine, which in my case is Ubuntu. Those directories that I would like to share with this virtual machine, I could specify that here, but for now we will leave that empty. Let's start the OS image. It's not able to find the device, and you could now observe that the ability to choose the image from which you would like to boot this VM, you get to see that only during the first boot. Now it's saying, boot medium system halted, it is not able to find it. So what we will do is go back to the settings again, go to the storage, and this DVD is empty for us. So we will, as you can see, the DVD drive is empty here, so that's why it gives that error message. Let's go and choose an image from here. This time around we like to install the text based Solaris 11, so let's choose that and say okay. Now boot the virtual machine. You would remember last time it gave us an error. This time it's able to find the ISO image from the DVD and it's booting from the DVD. Again, the boot order is important for us because once the installation is through, since hard disk has the highest priority as a boot device, and now that the OS is available in the hard disk post installation, it's going to boot from the hard disk, and that is why we rearranged the boot order to boot from hard disk first and then from the DVD. Otherwise, after the reboot post installation, the boot would always happen from the DVD instead of hard disk. So again, this is a similar screen that we saw in the live media installation also. We will go with the default value, and so do we do for the keyboard layout as well. Obviously there are some differences you would get to see between the wizard based installation that you saw in the live media installation and the text installation here. Remember, in the live media installation of Solaris 11, we did not get a page, we did not get a screen which prompted for the root password. Whatever password we assigned to the user we created during that installation was also the root password. Let's see if that's going to be the case when we perform a text-based installation. So we go with the first one, which is install the Solaris OS. Of course, it's self-explanatory from here onwards. It's a wizard. Of course, it's a text-based wizard rather than the GUI wizard that we saw in the live media installation. We can go with F2. The options we get to see is by and large similar to what we observed while we performed the live media installation. There also we were able to choose whether we wanted to install the OS on a local disk or an iSCSI disk. We will go ahead with the local disk option, and we are okay to use the entire hard disk, which is 60 GB of hard disk that we created for this virtual machine. So use the entire hard disk. And by the way, I'm actually hitting a combination of escape 2 to move on to the next page here. The computer name, it was Solaris as the default host name for the live media installation. In here, let's give it as S11 server, and then go on to the next page. This is where we get to specify the IP address if we are going to specify an IP address manually. So let's go ahead and choose manually and specify an IP address 192.168.0.100 and go to the next screen. Well, I don't want to configure DNS at this stage, and that's what I'm choosing here. I don't have naming services, so I will go with none there. I'll specify the time zone as Asia, and I'll choose India as the country. That's the time zone for me, and I'll go with the default value there. That's also the default value. I know the date is okay, the date is correct, so maybe I'll go with that as well. This is also fine for me. Now this is one screen I would like to pay a bit more attention to. Basically, a similar screen in the live media installation prompted you for a real name, a username, and the user's password. One additional option you get to see in the text-based installation is the root password here. Now you have a choice. You can skip the user account here. As you can see, it's optional, it's marked as optional, but of course the root password is mandatory in the screen. So I specify the root password. Now at this stage, if I proceed with this wizard without supplying a user account information, I would be able to directly log in as a root user into the Solaris OS when it reboots. So root is, a super user account, and you are able to log into the system directly using the super user account. On the other hand, if I give a username here, then root will not be able to directly log into the system as root user. One would have to log in using the user credentials here, which is Rajesh R in this case, and then perform a sudo operation as a root user to get the root privileges basically. So again, you have two options, whether you want a direct root login. If you're interested in a direct root login, you can skip the account creation here. You don't want to specify any details about the user on the screen. On the other hand, you want the root to be a role account, meaning root will not be able to directly log into the system. You will be logging in as a simple user and then switch to the root user for performing administrative activities. Then you need to supply the user account details as well, which is what I have done. So let's move on to the next screen. I think the support registration screen is also something that you looked at when you performed the live media installation. So most of the screens were pretty similar except for the user information that it prompted during the live media, which did not have a root password. I'm okay with it, so I would go on say that's fine, I don't have a proxy. It gives me a summary of the information I specified during the data collection, so I'm okay with that. As you can see, the installation of the Solaris has started. So the installation of the Solaris 11 using the text-based installer is through. Of course, I edited the video to make sure that you don't get bored looking at the progress bar of installation. So now is the time to either view the log or reboot the system. So I'm hitting escape 8 so that the reboot happens. And remember, since we specified the boot order to look for the device from the hard disk, it's actually go to boot from the hard disk instead of the DVD this time around. As you can see, it's picking it up from the hard disk. We will go with that option on the grub. No GUI this time, by the way. So the services are getting imported into the SMF repository. As you can see, the numbers showing up on the screen there is basically the services getting imported into the SMF. SMF is also going to be a topic that we would be discussing in a separate episode. So it's giving me the login prompt here. I mean, no point in waiting for a UI to show up. There is not going to be a UI in this case. So let's log in as, in fact, we can try logging in as a root user. And remember what I mentioned to you, since we specified the user account details, I wouldn't be able to directly log in as a root user. And the message also clearly indicates the same thing. It says roles cannot log in directly. So since I specified a user credential there during the time of installation, root has become a role account and not a normal account. So let's log in using the user ID there, and I am in. I could specify, I could look for the system details like IPADM show ADDR to find out the IP address, and you would see this time around it's not DHCP. Unlike what we saw in the live media installation, this is static because we set it during the installation by opting manually from the menu there, and the IP address is what we specify during the installation. More on networking and how we assign IP addresses, etc. In a separate episode. Let's take a look at the etc release to find out what is the release of the operating system, and that's again 11.3 for x86 version, and we could try the host name, which is actually the S11 server. So I hope with this episode you've also understood the very easy way of installing, or interactive way of installing the Solaris 11 operating system using a text-based installer. Of course, interactive installation is okay if you are installing OS on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 machines, but when it comes to a massive server farm, then you probably would have to fall onto the more convenient way of installation, which is actually the AI installation, and that's probably going to be a different episode in this playlist. I want to thank you again for taking time to watch this video. I hope it was useful for you.